This is the Maxiao Leadership Podcast.
My stories are dramatic, where it's like, I quit my job and started my own business from scratch. I up and moved 5,000 miles from home. Like, those are big, big leaps of faith that I was able to do because what is it that you really want? And we start from that place first, because I was standing at my desk, and so she called the number, and I will never forget the look on her face. She just went totally pale, and all she said was,
Hi, Lexi. Welcome to the Maxiao Leadership Podcast.
"Hi, Max. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here."
No, thank you for giving us some of your precious time. It's really an honor to have you here today. To get us started, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your background? Where did you grow up, and what were your early influences in life?
Definitely. So let's start right from the beginning. I was born and raised in upstate New York, and I, all my life, followed the path that I thought I was quote unquote supposed to take. So went to school, got good grades, did all the extracurriculars, did all the things. And I ended up going to college for business and marketing. When I was a senior in college, between classes and work, I started just this little passion-driven side hustle where from the college dining hall, I started coaching my friends and consulting startups on their marketing, and was having really a lot of fun with it. So then after I graduated college, again, I followed this path that I thought I was supposed to take, and I got a full-time marketing job. I was doing really well in it at 22, 23 years old. I was getting pay raises, promotions. I was hiring team members underneath me. Like, I was crushing it, and I had really made it. Like, this is what I worked hard for throughout school. And this was the aim all my life, was to get to this point. And so I felt as if I was on the top of this mountain, and I was achieving all these external things. I had all of this external success, but internally I was miserable. I hated my life. I hated going to work every day. I hated getting out of bed every day. And I was really questioning, first, is this adulthood now? Is this just what you do? You just go to a job that you hate, and you work it, and you get the paycheck, and you climb the ladder, and that's just it? And the other question in my mind was, is this all there is to life? Like, there was something deeper in me that knew that there had to be more to life than just working this unfulfilling job every day. And I continued to follow this path, and eventually what that led to were daily anxiety attacks when I got to work. It led to depression. It led to just this really deep unfulfillment and yearning for more out of life. And at that time, I really didn't tell anyone either. It was kind of just my internal secret. So I would show up at work and put a smile on my face, but no one really knew that I was feeling this way inside, and that I was really deeply unfulfilled and unhappy with my life. But I would, again, just show up and continue the motions. And then one day I had shown up to work, and one of our coworkers didn't show up in the morning. And we figured there's meetings going on, there's things happening. So we'll check in, see if she comes in, after lunch. Lunch rolls around, she's still not there. So now we are highly concerned. Where is she? We haven't heard from her, anything like that. Long story short, my team did some digging, and we found out that she actually took her own life unexpectedly the night before. And that really rocked my world, because I consider myself to be someone who's very emotionally intelligent. I'm very tapped in, and yeah, I had no idea, even working with her every day, that she was feeling that way. And it really caused me to question, how many other people are also feeling deeply unfulfilled and wanting more out of life, and I have no idea about. So after that happened, I refused to sit in meetings and talk about trivial topics, knowing that there's got to be other people out there who are also wanting more out of life and wanting to change their life. So 2 months after that happened, I decided to take a leap of faith to follow my dreams. And I quit that job. I up and quit that job to pursue my dream of being an entrepreneur. And I left at 23 years old to figure out how to start my own business. And I went back to doing what I was doing in the college dining hall when I was a senior in college. And I started coaching people, and I started helping different companies with their marketing. Back then, it was a lot more doing things like website design and logo design and that type of thing. And that gradually continued to grow over the years. And during that time, I picked up side hustles to pay the bills as I was figuring out how to build this business. And people thought I was crazy for up and leaving this really good job that I had, that I was succeeding in, to do my own thing and figure it out. And the more that I kept going with it, like I mentioned, my background is in marketing. So the more that I started to market my own business, the more I began to learn and see how many slimy and manipulative marketers are out there. And again, I knew that there had to be a different way. And I really discovered that you can market with soul and with authenticity as well as with strategy at the same time. And I found that there's so many people in the marketplace who wanted the same thing. They have these big dreams of starting a business and growing a business, but they're afraid to show up online. They're afraid to start the podcast. They're afraid to come across as a slimy salesperson. And so I started working with them as well, of how they can market in a way that's authentic to them and still strategic at the same time. And that's really when this whole idea of being a soul-trepreneur was born, of how can you lead with those dreams and those callings that you have within you, and yet at the same time still strategically build the business and the life that you want. So at my core, I really consider myself to be a transformer. I've transformed my life a variety of times. I again transformed my life a few years after that, when after building this business in New York and living in New York, I decided I had another epiphany where I saw my 20s going by, and all I was doing was sitting at my computer working on this business every day. And again, I had that calling of there's got to be more to life than just me sitting in front of this computer every day. And I decided to take a big leap of faith to follow my soul, and I up and moved from New York to Hawaii because I had this calling to live somewhere warm and by the ocean and experience new adventures and everything like that. And so back then, I didn't know anyone in Hawaii. I'd never been out here before. I just really took a big leap of faith to follow my soul and see what happened when I did. So I literally bought a one-way ticket. I sold my car in New York, packed 2 suitcases in a duffel bag, and just sent it. And I told my family, I was like, let me go try this for a year and let's just see what happens. And then a year went by and I was like, sorry, I'm not leaving anytime soon. And now I've been out here for about 3.5 years, which has been really amazing. So I'm always interested in seeing what happens when you do lead with those soul callings and what's really possible when you do, and now helping other people do the same so that they can create both their dream life and business.
Wow, that's such a powerful experience. And the question that comes from it was, how old are you? You feel like you've lived 100 years with all the experience that you've shared up until now. And so let's start to unpack all of these really, because you really touched on some very important point here. If I take you back to the beginning, what made you choose the line of business studies and not anything else? Where did that come from to study business and marketing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I have always had this entrepreneurial pull in me from a very young age. Like, I remember when I was a little girl, I have 2 older brothers. And so my parents always, we were all in sports and music and all the things. And so growing up, my parents always encouraged all of us to go to each other's sporting events and that type of thing. And I have a very vivid memory of when I was young. I was probably like 7. And back at the time, I was going to my brother's basketball game. And I had a CD player and I had my headphones with the wires attached. And I vividly remember leaving the house and having all my headphones like tied up and tangled and everything. And I remember looking at my dad and being like, imagine if there were headphones without any cords attached. And I remember having that thought back when I was young. And now we fast forward to today, and that's so normal. Like, I have AirPods in my ears right now. And so from a very young age, I just always had this innovative mind, this entrepreneurial spirit. I always knew deep down that I wanted to have my own business. And so that was just within me, I feel like from a young age. And so it felt natural for me to choose the route of, first of all, business when I was going to college. But then I think I chose marketing, honestly, back then just because it sounded fun. Marketing sounded like, that sounds like kind of cool and like you get to have fun with it. And then the more that I began to learn about marketing, the more I learned how much storytelling is in marketing and how much creativity is in marketing. And those are two things, and psychology. And those three things I really love are psychology, storytelling, creativity. And so the fact that I was able to take all of those things and use them in marketing, I think I was really drawn to that as well. But I mean, back then it was a journey where it's like I didn't know back then that I'd be wanting to do what I am today. Back then, I actually thought about going into the fashion industry. So I did a lot of internships. I did a lot of studies actually in the fashion world. I took a lot of fashion marketing classes. I did a lot of internships with different fashion companies and that type of thing. And it wasn't until I was a senior and I did a different internship with this consulting firm that it became clear to me, like, oh, this is actually the path I want to take instead. So I think that it's not about knowing right from the start, but not being afraid to refine as you go, because that's what really helped me get to where I am is refine and define what I actually want in a career. And that's what helped me find the path and follow the path that I did.
Right, that's very, very interesting. But it seems like you knew then already. So you knew the path, you knew it was marketing. You had a pull for entrepreneurship, so you tried that as a senior, consulting with your classmates. Yet you went to take a corporate job. What made you take a corporate job then, rather than starting your own company right out of college? And how was it like being in the corporate world?
This is going to sound so silly, but back then I just didn't even realize that entrepreneurship was an option at a young age. Like back then I was just focused on following the same path that my classmates were following, which meant you graduated, that senior year, you were doing internships, you were looking for jobs, you were applying to them, you graduated, you started this new thing. I think I was just following the crowd of what my other classmates were doing instead of tuning into what do I actually want. And I remember back then too, every time I would start the job search and I would look through jobs, I would just get this pit in my stomach of like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's like this isn't this, it just always felt off for me. And but I thought, this is just what you do. This is adulthood now. I have these student loans to pay off. I have to be an adult and like go to work now. And so I was just really in the mindset of this is just what you do, and that's that. And then I got into the corporate world and there were so many things that just didn't make sense to me in the corporate world. For example, like, how come if I finish my work early, I still have to stay here until the end of the day and act like I'm doing work when I've already finished my work? Or, how come I can't do the same work I'm doing, but from home when there's no reason for me to be in the office and be doing it? Why can't I be working remotely? So there were just always these little nuances that didn't make sense to me. And the longer that I stayed in the corporate world, the more it really showed me what I did and didn't want in a career. And part of that was, I want the freedom to work where I want. I want the freedom to work remotely. I want the freedom to work when I start working, when I want to start working. And those were things that were just really important to me that I discovered and I learned through that corporate job. And this was my unique path. Like I just have come to learn that I'm not built for that traditional world, but that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it either. I have friends who love their corporate jobs. They thrive in them. That's what they feel like they're here to do. And that's amazing. So it's not that I am, against corporate jobs. It's just, I've found that it's not the path for me, and that's okay.
That's great. And then, throughout that, you described that at some point you started to feel like not fulfilled, empty, and you had some moment of depression. And I know that there's a lot of talk these days about mental health and looking after each other. What was it like? What was your experience then? And thinking back to it now, what would you have done
Yeah.
differently?
I, if I could have done this differently, I would have opened myself up and talked to other people about it more. I was really nervous to open myself up in that way and to even share that with people. That was really hard for me to share, hey, I'm actually not happy. Hey, I put on this face every day and you probably think that everything's fine, but deep down there's a lot more underneath the surface. And back then I used to bottle up a lot more of my emotions versus express them. I've definitely have gotten way better at that over the years, but back then I would just bottle up my emotions, and so no one knew that I was even feeling that way. And if I could do it differently, I would have opened myself up and told myself it's okay that you're feeling this way. You know, it's okay to express your emotions. It's okay to ask for help from other people and to share your experience with them. So I think it was really lost in the sense of I didn't realize that it was okay to feel out of place in the workplace. I didn't realize it was okay to have emotions that weren't just all happy all the time, you know? And so I wish that I talked about it more. And I wish that, and I think that's also why I'm so passionate now about sharing my experience and sharing what I go through in my marketing and in the work that I do, because you never know who's going through what or what people are truly experiencing at the end of the day. Even our closest family and closest friends, you know, they still could be going through more than we even know. So just being more loving and patient and giving myself more grace are things that I wish I did, and I wish I was vulnerable, you know, to share those aspects of what I'm feeling with other people as well.
Yes, indeed. It's something that we, always the question is, you go to work, how close do you want to get to other co-workers? The reality is we spend most of our time with them, more so than people back at home.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about being, I don't know, don't have to be more close than you need to, but you have to have some bonds and need to look after each other because, you are in this together, really. But then you
Yeah.
were not the only one in
Yeah.
that workplace feeling that lonely, down, and you had this co-worker who could not overcome the same way that you did, really. And that tragic event, can you remind us how did that unfold and what happened that morning when you found out what had happened?
Yeah. So it was really interesting because I remember waking up that morning and I had this gut instinct. At that point, I was definitely thinking in my head, like, I am ready to leave this job. I'm ready to put my 2 weeks in. You know, I'm so over this. And I remember waking up that morning. It was just a random Wednesday morning and thinking to myself, something's going to change today. And I don't know what it is, but something's going to change today. And I went into work, and that morning we had a promotion that was going on. And that was my job. I was in charge of all the promotions. And so I started getting it ready, and I needed something from this teammate. And so we were all, you know, trying to reach out to her, didn't hear anything. But again, there were different meetings going on that morning and everything. So we, you know, just continued on, and I got everything set up in the morning. And then by the time the afternoon came around, she still wasn't there. And we had tried texting her and calling her, and nobody heard anything. So naturally, we were extremely concerned then of what happened. And so our teammate who is in charge of social media, she was great at her job. And so she did some even more digging through social media. She somehow found our coworker's boyfriend's phone number through the internet, called it, got in touch with him, and I will never forget the look on her face too. I was standing at my desk, and so she called the number, and she had said something like, you know, have you heard from her? And I just looked at my team member and the look on her face, and her face just went totally blank, and her whole skin tone went just pale. Like she just went totally pale. And all she said was, she's dead. And my heart totally dropped. And that moment changed my life forever, because from that moment on, and that's how we discovered that she took her own life the night before. That moment on, I couldn't help but question, what does this mean? And why did this happen? And what do I do about this now? And there were just all these questions that I had around it. And because of, our workplace and what was happening, we had to both grieve this loss of our teammate as well as continue to move business forward at the same time, which was a really weird world to live in, that you have to grieve but still keep moving forward at the same time. And again, at this point, I was only 23 years old. So I am just like, whoo, there's a lot going on in my world of how do you deal with losing a coworker and then still building this at the same time. And I'm still navigating corporate world and what does that mean and everything. But after that, I remember, we both as a team, we all had to grieve and keep moving business forward at the same time. And so we would still have our normal meetings and everything like that. And in those meetings, we would talk about, okay, next month, are we giving away a coffee maker or a magic bullet blender? And I was sitting there thinking to myself, we just lost a teammate. Like, we just lost a human being. I can't sit here and talk about if we're giving away a coffee maker or a blender. Like, there, to me, are bigger things in the world happening right now. Not to diminish that job or not to diminish any of that. But for me, I knew that there were just bigger conversations that I wanted to have around mental health, around how do you transform your life so that you actually live the life that you want, around what is actually possible when you pursue the path that excites you and what you feel like you're meant to do here versus just work the traditional corporate job. And so for me, I just knew from that moment forward, I want to do something with this moment that happened to me. And I don't want to just sit and talk about trivial topics, knowing that there are so many other people in the world that are probably also feeling unfulfilled and depressed and have anxiety attacks, and they don't know how to talk about it, or they don't have anyone to talk about it with. And that's really when this bigger mission in me wasn't born, but I feel like the fuel was added to the fire. I feel like I've always had a bit of this mission in me. And that's really when it just lit up even more. And I knew I had to do something about it. And I wanted to do something positive about it as well.
No, absolutely. And kudos to you for having done it. But then it took a while before you made the jump. You first said that you wish you had opened up a bit more, and your coworker that unfortunately took her own life presumably could have also opened up, and she didn't. And there's so many stories around of people feeling depressed, lonely, and failing to reach out to others. Why do you think that is, that we don't seek help when we need the most, and what can people around do to really bridge the gap and reach out to people in desperate need of help?
There are so many things that I think go into people not reaching out for help. One of the things is, in the day and age that we live in now, with social media and with just us being so connected to our phones, we'll go on these social media apps and scroll through, and what we see primarily are happy people living their best life. You see pictures of people on vacation, taking this trip, getting married, having kids, getting the promotion, you see people's highlight reels all the time. You don't see their hardships. You don't see the moments that they have the breakdowns. You don't see the depression. You don't see the struggle. And because of that, I think a lot of people think that they're the only ones going through it, because look at all these happy people on my Instagram feed or my Facebook feed or whatever. Look at all these things that people are doing. And they don't realize that it's people's highlight reels. That's what they're sharing on social media. But behind that, there's always so much more to the story that we don't know. There's always so much more that people are going through that we have no idea about. So I think first and foremost, it's the reminder that even though it may look like someone's life is perfect online, you never truly know what they're going through. And I can attest to that, because back then my life looked great online. You know, I had pictures of me traveling, and I had this amazing relationship at the time, and this and that and the other thing, and I was, you know, succeeding in my career. I had on the outside all the things. And so if you looked at my social media profiles back then, you would have never thought that I was depressed and anxious and hated my life, you know, but I knew beyond that, that was the truth. And so reminder number one is that you never fully know what people are going through. And there's always more to the story than just what you see online, first and foremost. Second of all, I think that it's a big reminder that we're all human as well. And we all face the spectrum of emotions of, you know, in life, there's always going to be the mountaintops and the valleys. And so trusting that, you know, when you're down in the valley, that's not forever. That's just temporary. That's something that I've really learned, because when you are in those hardships and when you're in those moments of really hard, challenging times, it feels like it's never going to end, right? It feels like this is my life and this is just how it is and it's permanent. And I've come to learn that that's not true. Everything is temporary. Life is always changing, and you can always change the situation that you're in. So trusting too that when you're in the valleys, you will get back onto a mountaintop again. And it just takes the drive to get yourself out of the valley, and trusting that, you know, a better day will come. So I think that also, I know as just a woman, how I was, you know, raised in this environment is we're very much so taught to be perfect and to strive for perfection. And it's like, if I show my weakness or if I show my emotions, that means I'm not perfect anymore. Is that okay? And that's something that I definitely faced, was realizing that it's okay. It's okay to feel that way, and it's okay to be imperfect. And so really embracing that versus feeling like you need to be perfect or you need to fit in with everyone else was really big for me as well.
And then you made a brave move of leaving corporate and starting your entrepreneurial journey. What was the hardest part in that decision?
The hardest part in that decision was trusting my gut, was the hardest part, because I had this, what I call, you know, a soul calling. It was in my soul, it's in my heart, my gut, my intuition, whatever you want to call that, your instincts. For me, I call it my soul. And in my soul, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I knew that I wasn't fit or cut out for the traditional corporate world. And I knew that I wanted to do different, bigger things with my life. And I knew that. But it was really hard to trust that when you have a ton of other people around you who are saying things like, you're crazy for leaving your job. What do you mean? You just got a promotion. Now you're leaving this? This is what you've worked so hard for all your life. You know, that's too ambitious. That's this, that's that blah, blah, blah. Like, I had all these voices around me that, because it wasn't their soul calling, they didn't understand that leap that I was taking. And I came to learn that years later. But I really took what other people had to say and their opinions to heart at that time. And that's what made this really challenging, is because I was battling this, hearing these external voices and what other people had to say about this, as well as my internal voice and what that had to say about it. And even though I could hear my internal voice, it was still so hard to trust that when I had all these external voices of people that I looked up to and people that I respected, you know, and people that I wanted their approval and I didn't get it. That caused all this like inner turbulence and doubt and fear in me of, you know, am I really making a mistake here? Is this a bad move to be making? You know, am I letting go of a lot? Am I making a mistake? And so it caused a lot of that fear and doubt. And so for me, it wasn't even the action of actually doing the thing because for me, you know, sending in my 2-week notice, that was the easy part. I just have to fill out a piece of paper, send it to my director, figure out a date, we're good. That was the easy part. For me, the hard part was actually trusting that soul calling that I had and taking action on it and not letting other people's opinions or outside voices stop me from doing that.
So how did you overcome that?
I just continued to trust that soul calling and take it one step at a time. I left that corporate job with two things. One, the idea that life could be better than how I was living it. And two, the knowing that I could figure it out as I go and that I didn't need to have all the answers right now. I didn't need to know it all, but guess what? We are blessed with things like Google and now ChatGPT and books and YouTube and podcasts and all the things. We are so blessed to have so much information at our fingertips. So I knew that I don't need to have all the answers right now, but I can figure this out as I go. And so that's when I started to pick up just little side hustles. I started babysitting and working at a coffee shop and just doing little things to pay the bills while I figured out how to start building this business. And that first year of business, I call it my personal growth boot camp because I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about business. And at that point, I was reading, honestly, a book a week just to figure out, what do I do? How do I do this? How do I navigate this? And that's even, I have a degree in business and marketing. And yet I was still, when I started my own business, was like, how do we do all of this? What's next? And so the way I overcame that was trusting that soul calling that I had. Also starting to create a vision for the life in the business that I uniquely wanted. That was huge for me. That was a really big game changer because then that showed me the life I actually wanted to create. And back then, which is now about 7 years ago when all of this happened, I was living in New York, really trying to just transform and change my life. And the first time I asked myself, what do I actually want? That was a huge game changer for me because the first time I sat down and asked, what is it that I want for my life? I have journal pages still of this where I would write down, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want the freedom to work where I want, when I want. I want the freedom to make however much money I want. I want the freedom to be able to go live by the beach and live this adventurous lifestyle and travel and do this and speak and all these different things. And wouldn't you know, now 7 years later, so many of those things that I once journaled about are now my reality and are now the life that I live to this day. So by also creating a vision for myself right from the beginning, that helped me stay true to this soul calling. And it helped me start to create the life I actually wanted versus the life that the people around me were living or those doubters, were living or that type of thing. Because I really started to establish, okay, I'm about to pave my own path and that's okay. And really accepting that and making that okay was so freeing for me versus feeling like I need to just follow the path that other people are taking and that other people have laid out for me or taken in the past.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are so many people out there, and I come across, and I'm sure you do too, that, and I'll put myself sometime in that category, who think about doing something different, taking this venture, but it's hard to sometimes make the step. And I came to the same conclusion as you did. It's a question about what do you want, and it's Dan Sullivan will say that, he's got this mini book about wanting what you want. And I think we've not developed enough the ability, since we left childhood, we lost the ability to really trust what we want and just want things not because, but just because we want it. And wanting what you want, for me, is the beginning of that journey of trusting yourself. But it comes with knowing yourself. And a lot of people, when they say don't know what to do, is more because they don't know who they are, what they want. Would you agree with that? Is that your experience too?
I would totally agree with that. In that we're not taught growing up to ask ourselves what we want. We're taught, here's what you should do. Here's the right thing to do. Weigh the pros and cons, follow this path. We're not taught to trust our intuition growing up. We're not taught to tune into that. We're taught to make the calculated decision. And so for me, when I started to get really clear on what is it that I want, that automatically helped me feel so much happier day to day. Like I was so much happier making less money, but going to babysit and work at a coffee shop and work on my business at the same time than I was climbing the corporate ladder in this job. And that was such a cool experience to me to see that when I started to tap into and do the more of the things that I was called to do or that I wanted to do, how much my life changed because of that. And so one of the other things I want to say is that doesn't mean that everyone has to go quit their job, and go pick up side hustles. No, that's not what that means. But, if there's a passion that you have, if you've been wanting to learn how to play guitar, if you've been wanting to learn how to cook, if you've been wanting to, just create more content on social media, whatever it is, can you start just doing those things, doing more of those things now, even in your day-to-day routine, to just start experiencing more of that happiness and start doing more of the things that you want without feeling like you have to totally drastically change your life to do those? Like, can you start small and just, if you feel like you've been wanting to learn guitar for super long, can you even just start by going and looking up, guitar lessons near you? Or take a baby step to start doing that thing. But I completely agree with you that so many of us just don't know what we actually want. And one of the things I always say to my clients is that they always know the answer. They always know the answer. But a lot of times you might not want to accept the answer because it might be a scary thing. It might be outside your comfort zone. It might be something that you feel like you're not ready for yet. It might be something that you are doubting. Can you actually do it? But your gut and your soul, and I fully believe this, always has the answer. Are you willing to listen and trust that? Or are you going to get caught up in all the fears and the doubts and the what ifs instead of trusting that? And then that's when we often go outside of ourselves and we go to other people and we go to other resources on what do I do? What should I do? What's the best option? But if you really do slow down and tune into your gut, it always has the answer on what next step to take.
Great. So is that why you call yourself soul-trepreneur? Can you explain what that means and how is it different to traditional entrepreneurship?
Yes, great question. That is where soulpreneur comes from, is that as soulpreneurs, we lead with those heart and soul callings first and foremost. So a soulpreneur is an entrepreneur who leads with the calling in their soul that builds a business that positively impacts the world so that they can experience the richness of life, is what a soulpreneur is. And what makes a soulpreneur different than an entrepreneur is that we are in it for the soul piece too, and the soul always comes first. So entrepreneurs a lot of times can just be in it for the money, can just be in it to build the business and be in it for the numbers and then sell that, yada, yada, yada. Whereas soulpreneurs, we're in it for that and so much more. We're in it not only for the money, but we're in it for the soul. We're in it for the heart. We're in it for the how big of an impact can I make? We're in it for building a business that actually makes a positive impact on the world versus just how much money can it bring in. And so as soulpreneurs, we value that heart and soul piece first. And then from there, we look at, okay, if this is my dream that I have, and this is what I feel really passionate about building, how do we now strategically build that too, so that it's a business that positively impacts the world, that it brings in the money that you want to be bringing in, and it allows you to live the lifestyle that you want to be living too, so you can experience all that life has to offer.
So how can someone tap into their soul's purpose in their work or business? What process do you take your clients through to discover that?
Great question. Great question. So like I mentioned, we always start with the soul piece first. So what that means is first and foremost, like I mentioned, what's the vision for the life and the business you have? And to your point, what is it that you really want? And we start from that place first, because can be so clouded with what other people want for us, what we're taught growing up we should want, what success looks like in society or for other people. And so that starting point really is just asking yourself, what do I really want? Not what do others want for me, not what path was laid out for me. What do I really want? What type of lifestyle do I want? What type of business do I want? What do I want to experience? What are the things I want to have? What are the things I want to do? Who do I want to be? And starting to really ask ourselves these questions is huge, because if we know where it is we are now and we know where it is we want to go, then we can actually start to close the gap between those two and start paving a path that you actually want versus just following the traditional path that's typically laid out for people. So first and foremost is getting really clear on that vision of where you want to go. Second is getting very clear on your why, of why do you want to go there? Why do you want to experience this? Why do you want to build this business? What is that deeper why? And a traditional entrepreneur might just say, I want to make a lot of money and I want to be successful and then I want to sell it and then I want to go travel the world, whatever. Where a soultrepreneur really looks at that deeper why. And for me, that was, I want to help people transform their lives so they're not facing anxiety and depression and, questioning their lives. I want to help people really transform, and I want to help people build a business that makes a positive impact and does good, and it helps them become all they're born to be. And so getting really clear on that why will also give you not only clarity, but it'll also give you jet fuel into then turning that vision into reality. If you've dug deep enough to get clear on what your why is, that's going to help you keep going through the hardships. Because truth is, in entrepreneurship, there's going to be very hard days. There are going to be ups and downs. There's going to be challenges. And if you're just in it for the money, you're going to want to give up really, really quick. But if you have a deeper why that pulls you forward, that's in it, that's why you're doing what you're doing every day, then even when those hardships come, you can connect back to that why and have that jet fuel to keep going and really continue to turn that dream into reality. So understanding that why is also huge. And then the third step that I take clients through with the soul piece of things is also looking at what are those limiting beliefs? What's that self-talk? And what is your mindset that may be holding you back from turning that vision into reality? Because truth is, I could sit down with a soulpreneur and give them, a marketing or a business strategy to go and execute that would totally help transform their business. But if they have a mindset that is around, who am I to go and do this thing? Or I'm not capable of this, or I'm not enough, or whatever it is, they're not going to execute on that. So we got to look at what is that internal programming and what is that internal software, and let's start to change that story to get you back to who you truly are. Let's get you reconnected to the work you're here to do and the power that you actually have, so that now when we map out that strategy, you actually have the juice to go and execute on it versus getting in your own way or stopping yourself from having success. So the vision, the why, and transforming those limiting beliefs are top 3 steps in starting to tune into your soul and really start to take steps in that direction.
Now that's very 3 powerful and I would say essential steps that you described there, especially the last one when you talk about, execution. I believe everything is in the execution. Anybody can have ideas, but what makes the difference is in the execution. Yeah. And it starts really with the mindset in approaching this. So what difference it makes, embracing being a soul-trepreneur versus, anybody else that will shift the mindset? How has your mindset shifted throughout your journey, and how does that impact the way you implement and execute your ideas and your plans?
My mindset has shifted so much, it is unreal. I remember and this was actually one of the first pieces that I started working on while I was still in that corporate job. Because one of the things that I did back then, like I said, I was miserable. I hated getting out of bed and going to work. I'd snooze my alarm until the last possible minute, roll out of bed, and get my morning going. And so back then, what I would do is any chance that I got when I was driving into work, when I was walking into work, if I had time at my desk where I was just doing work on my computer, I wasn't in any meetings or anything, I had headphones in my ears and I was listening to an inspiring podcast, an inspiring video from YouTube, something around how to change my life, something around how to build a business. I just tried to infuse as much positivity into my ears as I could because I felt so depressed and I didn't want to be there. So from that, one of the things that I started to pick up on when I was still in my corporate job was how I spoke to myself every day. And the way that I spoke to myself back then was not healthy. I always beat myself up for something. I was always saying, Lexi, you're so stupid. You're so dumb. Why'd you do that? You're not enough. Blah, 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 blah. There were all of these just negative stories. And that's how I spoke to myself every day on repeat. And one of the first things I did was I started to notice that story and how I spoke to myself. And I started to change that over time. So every time I caught myself saying, Lexi, you're so stupid, I'd catch it. I wouldn't judge it. I would just become aware of it. And then I'd say, okay, is that true? Is that true that you're stupid? I'd be like, well, no, that's not true. I'm like kind of smart. I've done a few things. I got some brains up there. And then I'd start to change that story and I'd say, okay, no, I'm smart, but I just haven't learned how to do this thing yet. And that's okay. And I started really changing the way that I spoke to myself. And slowly but surely, I took every single one of those stories and I would start to transform them. And that helped a lot because that helped me really start to show up in a different way. It started to help me believe in myself and it started to help me see what I'm really capable of and what's really possible for me. And that's been a muscle that I've continued to strengthen over the years. I think that your mindset is a muscle just like anything else. If you aren't going to the gym and working that muscle, it's going to get weaker. If you go to the gym and keep working, it's going to get stronger. So mindset from the beginning has been a muscle that I have been working on strengthening. And so even to this day, I'll still have moments where those stories will pop up of like, Lexi, who are you to do this? But I catch it so much quicker now. And I work the muscle of having a positive mindset and seeing who I really am, what I'm capable of so much easier now than I did in the past. But that's been something that's just been continually ongoing throughout this journey, is continually working on my mindset, continually working on how I see myself, continually working on how I speak to myself. Because truth is, one of the things that I've learned in this entrepreneur journey is that people are going to come and go in your life, but you're always going to have you throughout your life. And you got to be on your own team because of that. And you got to be your own team member because of that. And if you're showing up and you're beating yourself down and you're speaking negatively to yourself and you're not believing in yourself, like that's not a good team member, So how would you speak to a friend? And can you start speaking that same way to yourself and showing up as your number one fan? Because you're going to need that in this journey. Because sometimes, especially when you're just starting, it's just you and that's all you got. And you're believing in this crazy dream that no one else believes in yet. And all you have is your vision and this crazy idea. And you got to be on your own team first to then even expect other people to be on your team too. So that is a huge proponent of this. Is the mindset work is always going to be ongoing work. But the stronger you can get that muscle, the easier it is to use it and the stronger it continues to get.
Yeah, that's so true. Yet there are reality around us that often fuel those limiting beliefs. Or, I might be, I've got a family. I don't know whether you had a family at the time when you made your shift in your career, but maybe somebody wants to make the same move, but they have younger children to look after, and then they feel like they cannot do that yet, or they might feel like they don't have the resources to support the dream. So what would you tell to people in that situation when it comes to trusting that inner voice?
Yeah, great question. I was in a different situation when I started, which is partially why I started so young, is because back then I knew I didn't have a family or kids to support. I had a little more wiggle room to make mistakes if I made mistakes and to learn from them. So that is partially why I started at the age that I did, was to take on a little bit more of that risk in my 20s. And for people who, don't have that but want to explore more of their passion, first reminder is, again, you don't have to make any dramatic changes like I have. Like my stories are dramatic, where it's like, I quit my job and started my own business from scratch. I up and moved 5,000 miles from home. Like those are big, big leaps of faith that I was able to do because I didn't have kids or a family at the time or anything like that. And so first and foremost, it's understanding that you do not need to make any big leaps of faith. You can, but you don't have to change your life. If you're working in a job, and first and foremost, it's just finding out what is that passion that you actually have and how can you start doing that even if it's on a small scale. So many of my clients I work with say things like, I want to start this podcast, or I want to go travel, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And it doesn't mean they have to totally quit their job or totally change their life to do that. It's okay. How do we get you to take a step towards starting the podcast then? How do we start to just think about, what do you want your podcast to be about? And maybe we just start by figuring that out and figuring a title before we even launch it or do anything. Or if you want to travel, maybe it's, okay, where do you want to travel to? And can we start saving money for that? How can we make that reality? So don't feel like you need to make these drastic life changes to start following your passion. You can do it in small ways as well, in a way that works for you and is aligned with you as well. And then the more that you lean into it, the more the stronger that muscle becomes, because I believe that listening to your intuition, your gut, that is a muscle as well, just like anything else. And the more that I have started to play with that and just tune into it, see what it has to say, take that next step and see what happens, the more I've been able to strengthen that muscle. And now I can hear what my soul has to say so much more clearly, because I've just worked on practicing that as a muscle. And so I think the biggest thing is remembering you don't have to make these big leaps of faith. You can, totally. It's been really, I've learned a lot from doing that myself. But you can start small too. And you can start by just listening, even when you have those moments of, you think of a friend or you think of someone randomly, they pop up into your mind, instead of just brushing that off, like give them a call and see what happens when you do. I've had those moments too, where I've thought of a friend randomly. So I just texted them and said, hey, I was thinking of you, wanted to see how you're doing. And their response was, wow, I'm so happy you reached out. Like, I was actually having a really rough day. Here's what's going on. And it turns out that, I could help them in that situation. So starting to practice and play with even those little intuitive hits that you get, or if you're driving home from work and your intuition's like, let's go this different direction versus the one we take every day. Just start playing with that a little bit more and seeing what happens. And the more that you do that, the stronger that instinct will become. And the more that you can start to trust it and just act on it.
Yeah, no, I realize that so often, that sometimes you got that inner voice that say, do this. And yeah. I don't listen, I don't trust it, I don't do it right away. And then a few moments later, something happens and I'm like, gosh, I should have listened to that because it was anticipating. Yes, exactly. And then so I started to say, okay, next time I feel it, I will listen to that. And often it's true. Now, one could say it's you just like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I think there's more to that, right?
Yeah, I gave a TEDx talk in April all about the power of leading with your soul and how doing so will help you live your life to the fullest. And one of the things that I was amazed to find when doing that talk was how leaders who have greatly impacted our world, such as Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, Albert Einstein, they all attest that their success is because they listened to their intuition and they led with their intuition. And that is amazing to me, especially knowing that majority of people don't make decisions from their heart. They make them from their head. Yet we have leaders who have greatly impacted our world who are saying, I was successful because I trusted my intuition. And that is huge to me of, what really is possible if even just a percentage of us started to listen to our intuition even more and started to trust that and trust what it had to say. But like I mentioned earlier, so many of us are not taught that growing up. We're not taught to listen and trust that gut instinct. We're taught to weigh the pros and cons and do the calculations, And so my my whole experience in this has been when I lead with my soul first, what is actually possible? And that's been such a driver for me. And what's also been a driver for me is that I don't want to come to the end of my life and have regrets about how I lived it. And so anytime I'm making a decision as well, I will ask myself, if I don't do this thing, will I regret it at the end of my life? And every time that answer comes back yes, I know that that's something that I have to go and do because I am so driven by not wanting to experience regret in this lifetime. And I am just really curious about when you do listen and say yes to that soul calling, what actually happens. And the more that I do that, the more just synchronicities and this whole other possibility that I didn't even know existed happens. And that's been really cool to experience.
Yeah, very good. Now, you encourage entrepreneur business leaders to live with purpose, you know, drive their business with purpose. Yet, a business at the end of the day is also meant to make profit. And how do you manage that challenge of balancing, you know, driving with purpose and making profit?
I think the starting point there is understanding that you can have both. You can have purpose and you can have profit. And I think a lot of the soulpreneurs I work with who want purpose so bad think they need to give up the profit to do so, or they're nervous to even receive the profit because they're like, who am I to charge for this thing? Who am I to charge for this service that comes easy to me? Who am I to, do this, do that? When truth is you can have both. And so much of it too comes back to money mindset, which I work on with clients as well, because there's one client in particular that I'm thinking of where we were having a conversation around this, where he's like, I'm really ready to make more money in my business. And the first question I asked him, instead of asking, how are we going to do that? Blah, blah, blah. Instead of getting into the strategy, I asked him, how are you with receiving more money? And as soon as I asked that question, you could just see it. His whole body tensed up. He couldn't even find the words to express how he felt about receiving money. And he just his whole energy just shifted. And I said, okay, well, let's focus on changing that first. Let's focus on you being able and being willing to receive larger amounts of money. Because again, if your mindset isn't there and your energy's not there, it's going to be really hard to make it happen. And so from there, we were able to work through the mindset and the limiting beliefs and the things that came up for him around that, and then create a game plan around, okay, now how are we actually going to do this? And what does that look like? And now he is making more money, which is awesome. And I think it's realizing, a lot of us were raised with really wonky beliefs around money of, money is evil, or you can't have a lot of money, or you can't do good and have a lot of money, or whatever it is, money doesn't grow on trees, whatever it is. And so understanding first and foremost that you can have purpose and profit, and that not only is that okay, but that is a great thing. If we can get more profit into more of the hands of people who are doing good in the world, that is such a good thing to me. And so understanding you can have both, and you don't have to get in your own way. You don't have to block yourself from receiving that, but that is a possibility as well. And I think that a lot of just entrepreneurs only focus on the profit versus the purpose. And in the soulpreneur world, I'm focused on how can we have both? How can we do things with a purpose and bring in money to support that? And understanding that money, just like anything else, you're always in a state of giving and receiving. So and this was the conversation I was having with that client of, if you're really good at giving, you're really good at giving money or giving your time or giving your energy, but you're not really good at receiving, that we need to get that back into balance, because everything in nature is always in this constant state of giving and receiving. We look at our breath, even we're breathing in every moment, and we're always receiving air in and then giving when we breathe out. And we're always in this constant state of giving and receiving so naturally that we don't even realize we're doing it in every single moment. And so if you're just giving all the time, which a lot of soulpreneurs I work with are in this always giving state, and they're always just say, for example, exhaling, eventually you're going to get to a place where you need to breathe in. And if you don't breathe in, you're going to die. And so it's understanding it's healthy to breathe in and to receive. And the same goes with money too. Like, it's safe and it's okay to receive and to give. And that's actually your natural state of being, is that well-being. And so the same comes for money. The same comes for your time, your energy, all the different things. And if you can get yourself back into that natural state, you will find that you can have both the purpose and the profits as well, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's Brandon Bashar who says, if you don't have the money, you can't support the purpose. So you need the money in order to support your purpose and continue to make your voice heard to the world. So do you have an example for us where following your intuition, your purpose led to a significant breakthrough in your business or business of your clients, and that helped them grow their business further?
Yeah, I mean, so many, so many all the time. Let's see what a good example would be. But I would say, honestly, so many different things. One of the things that comes up for me is when I started my podcast as well. So I also have a podcast called Building My Empire, A Journey of Transformation. And that I started back in 2019. And my whole podcast is around documenting the journey of building my business from the ground up and transforming my life along the way. So when I first started my podcast, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no like fancy equipment. I had no nice mic, nothing like that. I literally had my iPhone and my white Apple headphones, and that's what I started with. And I sat down, I recorded the first episode, which shares my story. And then as I continued to build this business, I would just record episodes along the way of things that I was learning, wins I had, failures I had, different things I would try. It wasn't until probably like episode 50 that I actually got my nice mic that I use now. And then, more episodes down the line, I start to do guest interviews of cool people I meet along the way with inspiring stories of how they've transformed their life. And then you keep going down the journey and listening to episodes, and you hear me talk about, how I was building a business throughout the pandemic and throughout COVID, and then how I moved from New York to Hawaii. And so I just take listeners along this journey with me, which has been really cool for not only my clients, but also just for listeners as well, because it's given them an insider look into how do you actually build a business from scratch and do it with purpose and make profit at the same time, and do it in a heart-centered way, yet still strategic at the same time. And it's given them not only insight into what I'm going through or what I'm learning or what I'm working through, but also it's given them inspiration and guidance on next steps for them to take, or strategies for them to take, or different things, which has given them the ability to, grow their business or change their life. And so what's been really cool about that is it's impacted listeners around the world. And so I've gotten onto, phone calls with people I've never met before who have spoken to me, and they're like, I'm so excited to meet with you because I listened to this episode and I also went through the same thing, and I really connected with you over this, that, and the other thing. And it's so cool to know that people are building relationships with me just through listening to the podcast, and it's helping them in a positive way. So I would say by doing that and really coming from this place of documenting the journey, when it comes to marketing, one of the biggest things that I tell people with marketing strategy is don't feel like you need to create content. Just document and bring people along the journey with you as you do this thing, as you achieve that goal, as you build this or build that. And that's been really cool for me, is to be able to document this journey and bring people along with me, because it's shown them in real time that I'm also imperfect, and I've also struggled with the mental health issues, and I've also used to talk so poorly to myself and have no idea how to build a business and do all these things. And now look at how far I've come. And if I did it, you can do it too. And I think that's been the most empowering, really cool thing for me, especially knowing back where I started in that corporate job and doing what I said of, I would listen to positive podcasts about entrepreneurship and creating your dream life and all these things back then. And so to be able to now be on the opposite side of that and to be a creator in this world to help other people do the same has been really cool. Just to give that to people and have it be a free resource for people to be able to tune in and learn from.
Wow, your story is so inspiring, and you are so believable, Lexi. It's
Thanks.
it's very captivating.
Thank you.
So really, really, no. I feel like I've known you forever.
I love that. I love that, man.
No, seriously. So, this podcast is about leadership, and it's for corporate leaders and corporate executive and entrepreneurs. Throughout your own stories and your experience, how would you define leadership today, and how have you grown as a leader over the years?
I have first and foremost grown so much as a leader over the years. Growing up, I started at a young age with entrepreneurship and with all of this, but growing up, I never saw myself as much of a leader until when I was in high school. I was feeling this sense of just trying to find my way as a teenager and just trying to figure out, life and what all this meant and everything. And when I was a sophomore in high school, I had been nominated by someone that I still have no idea who it was to this day, but I was nominated by someone in my school to represent my school at this leadership conference in New York, where one student from all the local high schools would represent their school and go to a college campus for a weekend for this whole leadership retreat. And I had been nominated, and I said yes, and I went. And that was the first time I ever viewed myself as a leader, which was really cool. And that event really changed my life, where we were doing things like learning about leadership, learning about teamwork. We were doing very entrepreneurial things. So we actually started a little business over the weekend, and we had to market it and we had to pitch it to other students. We were learning all these different traits of what it means to be a leader. And so that was for the first time me viewing myself as a leader, which was a very new concept for me. But once I started to do that, things really shifted for me, where I started to see myself as having kind of this responsibility on my shoulders of understanding that people do follow, or people do trust my opinion, or people do look up to me. And that I don't take lightly. Like, that means a lot to me. And so then throughout the rest of high school, then I started to then step into more leadership positions. I started to step into being captain, of the volleyball team, and this and that and the other thing. And then from there, just that idea of being a leader, really, I just took it with great responsibility as I continued to grow up and go throughout college and then start a business and all these things. And when you start to identify yourself as a leader, I do believe that there is responsibility that comes with that, and that people will listen to what you have to say. And when I first started my podcast, as I mentioned, I was in the mindset of no one's going to listen. Like, this is just something that's fun and blah, blah, blah. But then when people actually started to listen and they'd be like, Lexi, I listened to this episode, or I took this away, I was like, oh my gosh, like, people actually are listening to what I have to say and like taking my advice. And this is a big deal. And so understanding that people are always, whether it's your kids, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's random people on social media, like, people are always observing and watching what you're doing, even when you don't think they are. I have 2 young nephews, and I love playing with them and I love spending time with them. And with them, I see it all the time because they're constantly learning new things and adapting, and they'll watch you. They'll watch what you're doing. They'll mock what you're saying. They'll pick up the language that you're using, and it's in real time. You see, okay, like, I am being a leader for them. How do I, want to show up and influence them? And so understanding that you do, whether you realize it or not, you do influence people, and how you show up, the words that you use, the energy that you portray, that is having an impact on people, whether you are in a traditional leadership role or not. And like, really being intentional about that is huge. And so how I define being a leader is really being intentional with how you want to show up, and not taking advantage of your leadership role, but instead showing up from a place of service and duty, and showing up as your best self to then help other people do the same. And it doesn't mean perfect. That's different than perfect. We're not asking you to show up as perfect. But if you can show up and do the right thing even when no one's watching, or you can show up and show up as your best self no matter who's watching, that and make the hard decisions from a place of integrity and truth, I think those are the hard things that leaders have to do, but also it makes a big difference.
Yes. People are watching you, they take notice of what you do in whatever field of work you are in, and that's so true. And what if you were to go back to 22 years old Lexi, at this critical moment now, with everything that you know, and as a leader that people look up to you, what would you say to 22-year-old Lexi at that moment that will help her navigate the years coming?
I would start by giving her a hug. And I would also tell her to deeply trust that inner voice inside of her, no matter what other people around her have to say. I would tell her that to not worry about being perfect and to focus instead on taking one step at a time in the direction that you want to go. I would tell her to trust the timing versus feeling like she needs to rush through it or go from like 0 to 100 real quick. I would tell her to continue to trust herself, to not be afraid to pave her own path and to do things her own way, and to just remind her that to be careful about who she takes advice from. And if there are people around her that aren't living the life she wants to live, then be cautious about taking advice from them if they're not living their lives to the fullest or living the life you want to be living or have the things you want to have or doing the things you want to do. Take their advice with a grain of salt and continue to trust in your vision, continue to trust in that calling that you have, and continue to trust that the dreams that you imagine are real and possible. And it's okay if other people don't understand that or can't see that, because truth is everyone has their own dreams. And a lot of times when people don't support yours, it's because they don't have the same dream as yours. They can't understand what your dream is or what that calling is for you because they have their own. And that's okay. And it's okay if they don't support that. But again, you have to be on your own team. You have to be your own number one fan first and foremost. And if you can do that and continue to just take one step at a time, trusting in that dream that you have, it's a game changer.
I totally agree with you, yet someone listening will say, I tried to listen my inner voice before and then things went wrong. And and for some people that they start of doubting themselves and stop listening to their inner voice or not knowing whether to trust that voice or not. Have you had such experience where you thought you were listening to your voice and then things didn't work out as the way you wanted, and how did you come back from that?
Totally. This has happened to me so many times. I'm so happy that you asked this question. Number one thing to note is that just because you listen to your soul doesn't mean that things are always going to work out in the way that you envision them working out or the way that you want it to or whatever it is. And this has happened to me so many times of, I thought I was going to leave this job and start this business and I was going to build it so quickly in 2 years and do this and do that. And my journey has totally taken a different path than I thought I was going to originally. Back then I had no idea that I was even going to move out to Hawaii or come out here, or this was even a possibility. And I think the bigger thing to note and the bigger thing that I have learned in this journey is usually I will have this idea in my head of how I want things to work out or how I think it will work out or how I think it should work out. But what I don't realize is that there's actually something even bigger, even better trying to happen for me that I didn't even know was a possibility. Now, I want to be clear on this, that this isn't me trying to have toxic positivity, because that's not what this is about. This is about understanding. For me, I believe in the universe.